So there it is. We're live. Namaste, Sat Sri Akal, greetings. Good evening, Manveer. How are you?
Very well, Jerry. I mean, it's a privilege indeed. I think after an extensive week of travel, I think I just love doing this because as I complete 2 years of my book,
Right,
it's such a
right,
momentous occasion to probably be doing this with you. So thank you
right.
so much, first of all, for having me here.
No, no,
Yeah.
thank you for making the time to be with us for the experience cool convos that we have with inspiring authors. And you're a food entrepreneur, and I think a lot of people will learn a lot from you about how they can, you know, uh, achieve financial independence through catering. Right, that's what your book is all about. A very warm
Absolutely.
welcome to everybody who's joined us on Facebook Live. Sorry, we are a little late in starting today because of some tech issues, and we are glad to have Manveer Singh Anand with us to discuss his book. So, Manveer, to begin with, like we do with all our authors, before we go forward and listen into your life story and your life journey, if I had to ask you to get rid of all your titles, all the accolades and rewards that you accomplished over the years, and
Hmm.
tell you and ask you that if Manveer Singh Anand had to define himself as an individual in
Hmm.
7 descriptors, and the descriptors could be nouns, verbs, adjectives, roles, responsibilities, ethics, values, yeah, what would the 7 descriptors be? It could be one word, it could be a set of words. So how would you best define Manveer Anand, the individual?
So with all due modesty, I would call it the first and the most important word as part of my life, which is called entrepreneurial.
All right.
Because that's one of the nouns I most resonate with. Initiator, executor, and most importantly, a team builder because
Right.
that's how, we've built our teams. So broadly,
Right.
these are the amalgamation of a couple of words wherein which I genuinely find synergy with,
Yeah.
and that's how I can structure it. Yeah.
So basically, you have a kida, or entrepreneurial kida, and you thrive on entrepreneurship. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely,
Very
absolutely,
nice. Excellent.
absolutely, absolutely.
Excellent. And I think entrepreneurship is the way forward now because there are no jobs out there. In fact, we have an entire program that we started
Hmm.
to coach and mentor young students who are graduating, on the verge of
Hmm.
graduating, that there are no jobs out there, but don't lose heart, because you can become an independent entrepreneur or a professional and do something with your own life by creating your own path. So we have this program going on called the Rex Global Youth Fellowship, and I'm sure all the young leaders will also benefit from your conversation with us today. So that's one,
Absolutely.
entrepreneurial. Okay, very nice. What would the second one be?
Will be like I said, initiator, because that's a part of it, because I fundamentally believe you can't execute things if you don't start, and the
Right,
start always can be small, but you can have a broader vision. And
right,
I really resonate with this word because if either it's anything, probably as part of my team I'm the first person to initiate, but I'm fundamentally of the belief that start at the earliest, and if you feel it does not really make a difference, but at least you take the learning. So that's how it typically works. Yeah,
so what you're saying is do things with your own initiative. You don't need to be
absolutely.
told.
Yeah,
You use your own initiative and resourcefulness. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
absolutely,
All
absolutely.
right, brilliant, very nice, excellent. And you have 5 more to go.
So, like I said, besides that would be most important thing, which is called executionist. Because
Okay.
I mean, like I said, ideas are nothing without execution. And while you can initiate them, a lot of people lose steam in between. So I think since we've been heading towards our vision, and we've been starting a lot of ventures as part of my company, I think executionist is one of the terms I really resonate with as part of my ethos, because that really helps build a larger business of sorts, which I've been able to learn over the years. Yeah.
Right. And I've seen this as a leadership coach working with businesses and entrepreneurs and business leaders the world over. Everyone loves to come up with great visions, great strategies. But I think where it all falters and fails is
Mm-hmm.
when people don't have an execution plan. And when you say execution, I mean, is it only about your execution, or do you come up with an execution plan along with your team for the entire team to follow? How do you kind of work on the execution plan?
I fundamentally believe execution is always has to be hybrid.
Hmm.
I mean, you can try to move the mountains yourself, but you can't do anything yourself alone, right?
Right.
And especially in the kind of hospitality business I run, I can just plan the basics. But
Right.
if the team does not execute it, my
Right.
plans are just nothing but just a piece of paper,
Right.
or an Excel sheet probably. So
Right.
for me, it's fundamentally about about getting the team together,
Right.
and following that hybrid, because there's a very
So,
important
so
thing.
what do you mean by hybrid? I'm understanding what you're saying, but I would like the audience and the participants who have joined us on Facebook to understand this better. Because what I've seen in most organizations is, the so-called CEO or the so-called leadership team will create a vision and a strategy. And I always joke with them that, just because you have some fancy degree from some expensive school and college, don't think that you can
Mhm.
come up with the vision and strategy for the entire organization, because
Absolutely,
you don't
absolutely.
create vision and strategy, you co-create.
Yeah.
Others, it's like, me sitting in my glass house in Gurgaon or Delhi or Nariman
Mhm.
Point and coming up with a strategy for farmers in Maharashtra and Vidarbha and Dhule and Jalgaon.
Absolutely.
It won't work, because I need to learn from them. So is that what you're saying?
So when I say hybrid, my
Yeah.
focus was what I was just about to say, that
Mm.
entrepreneurship to a large extent, or any initiative. When I say entrepreneurship, it's not only, I consider someone working in an organization also as an entrepreneur. That's how it's
Right.
called, right? Because
Right.
I mean, if you stick to your basics, you don't really execute much, and that's how we've been trying to create entrepreneurs within organizations, giving them certain
Right.
small businesses, your certain key accounts responsibilities. And when I say
Mm.
hybrid responsibility, like I said, as an entrepreneur, what is important is to understand that there has to be a certain degree, and I would say more than a certain degree of discipline within yourself, but more
Mm.
importantly, that discipline has to be, I would say, ingrained within the team. Because if they're not the ones executing it, your plans are just going to be like a fugazi, the way a lot of people say. And
Right.
we don't want similar experiences wherein which you start explaining a lot of elements to the clients, but then the execution does not happen. So I
Right.
fundamentally believe that hybrid aspect is like that you have to ingrain that within yourself as well as your team, and that's how it typically works. Yeah.
Right. And that's a great thought, because I actually run a program,
Hmm.
which visioning workshop, which is called
Hmm.
RDX, right?
Hmm.
It's
Right.
nothing as explosive as the explosives which are used in RDX, but it's
Absolutely.
all about rigor and discipline of
Hmm.
execution. Right, the
Hmm.
rigor and discipline of execution. And I
Hmm.
always tell leaders who are leading organizations or ventures that you don't create the vision, you
Hmm.
co-create the vision and the
Absolutely.
execution plan along with the team.
Beautiful.
And that's how you create ownership. And we've broken it down that first you kind of work on the dearly obsessive goals. This is from my Mojosh Inspirator self-help and self-help book for personal and professional growth. So first you create the dearly obsessive goals. What are those, one, two, or three goals? Not more than three goals. And the reason I say
Absolutely.
dearly obsessive goals is because the acronym is DOGS. So people are
Hmm.
loyal to those goals. They have the rigor and discipline to see those goals through. Right.
True.
and,
True.
and
Very
and
true.
then you create the elephants and the ants. Elephants
Very
are
true.
the one-time big things that you need to do, right? And those mostly get taken care of. But where the execution plan always falters is the ants, the small things which make the big difference. And I'm
Hmm.
sure in the catering business and the food service business, you would have noticed this. The small things are not paid attention to, then your
Absolutely.
entire model and your entire service can go for a toss.
Very true.
Would you
Very
agree
true.
with me?
Absolutely, I resonate with you because, like I said, like unlike other businesses, especially a lot of businesses which are person driven, and
Right.
which can be done, like investment banking for that matter, can be done through relationships. These are businesses which need meticulous, planning and execution, and
Absolutely.
and execution with a team. So I
Absolutely.
absolutely resonate with whatever you say. I mean,
Yes,
I'm
you're
absolutely like,
I always tell business leaders that you're as strong or weak as the strongest or weakest link. So if
Absolutely.
everyone in your team is not up to speed and not on the same page, you're far
Right.
from delivering with excellence, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm happy to hear you resonating that. Very, very nice. So that's how we've broken it down: daily obsessive goals, and then the elephants, the big things which need to be done. Those are one-time activities. But what do we
Absolutely.
need to do week after week? And have we broken down the process into steps and a micro list? And I'm sure that in the catering business, you will be having a checklist before each delivery and service delivery that you do. How do
Absolutely.
you break that down into an execution plan?
So the beauty is that I I'm probably the only person, who came into the business without any prior background in the hospitality industry. I mean,
Okay. Okay.
when I was starting out, but the good thing was that I started my career as a management consultant.
Right.
So probably a checklist based mindset was the first thing,
Right.
which I
Right.
was able to ingrain in my team.
So which
And
consulting firm did you start with?
I started with, there's a company called Protivity Consulting, which is
Oh, right.
basically,
Productivity. They are, they are,
government.
they are my clients. I just concluded a training program for them
Yeah.
last week. Yeah. Brilliant.
And
Brilliant. So you started with them, is it?
yeah, I started with them, then moved on to KPMG for a bit. And that's when I just thought that probably let's deep dive into the entrepreneurial bit. But I believe that those years, those fundamental building blocks were so important because the beauty of internal audit, risk advisory, management consulting, or business advisory services is the fact that I fundamentally believe that what a lot of consultants do is basically provide you with common sense, which is
Right.
not common.
Right.
And if that can be ingrained within the management and the team, most importantly, I think that's basically because the beauty of consultants is that because they work across multiple organizations, they understand the good parts of every organization and they can implement that. And that's how this entire aspect of
Right.
checklist based understanding, probably building matrices against that, decision matrix, approval matrix, all these aspects were something
Right.
unheard of in the industry, and that really helped me, I mean, at a point in time. So yeah, i
Right.
mean i mean I absolutely resonate with whatever you're saying, and a checklist based mindset is something which was not there in the industry per se,
Right.
leaving the hotels per se. I'm talking about the
A-
conventional
a-
industry, but
and
we've
and
kind of
that
leveraged
that's
that.
how even flights have crashed, right? Because they have not
Mhm.
adhered to the checklist. But that said, I would like to kind of push back with a small thought about consulting, because I work with a lot of consulting firms as a external
Mhm.
coach and consultant.
Mhm.
And what I specialize in is I facilitate ideas and thoughts from the business leaders, the team members, and everybody in the teams. And
Mhm.
what I've seen is that over time, because a lot of, like you said, because a lot of consulting firms work with several clients,
Mhm.
they think they know exactly what would fit well for another client. But that
Mhm.
need not be true, because one size does not fit all. At the same
Beautiful.
time, what works in America may not work in India. So so
Absolutely.
the, so the way we I do it as a consultant is I facilitate the entire knowledge and wisdom from the team members itself, and
Mhm.
then articulate it for them. And the reason I use that analogy of the farmers is because I've done work with the farmers in Vidarbha and
Mhm.
Dhule and Jalgaon, and
Mhm.
all the ideas for action came from the farmers. I only kind of helped them to put it in a process and then kind of
Absolutely.
articulated the thoughts and gave
Absolutely.
it to them.
Absolutely.
So that's what you need to do as an entrepreneur,
Very true.
or a business
Very true.
leader also. Brilliant. So entrepreneurial, initiator, executioner. What is next?
Realist.
Realist. What does that mean?
You know, I and something my team really has a lot of problem with. They tell me, and fundamentally everyone needs big plans, but I fundamentally believe that what is important is with things, what you can do with things at hand.
Right.
And realist really has really helped us. I mean, a lot of people tell me that broader visions really help you, but I think sticking to the basics, following that process on a daily basis and trying to scale it with the set resources has
Right.
really helped us over the years. And that's how realist is a very important adjective I resonate with, because
Right.
like I said, everything is about what you can execute at a certain scale,
Right.
and with certain degree of comfort. And that's how I've been able to resonate with this term specifically.
Right. And being realistic is a part of goal setting, right? Because when you're
Absolutely.
when you're
Absolutely.
creating and setting those dearly obsessive goals, the dogs, you
Mhm.
have to be smart, right? Which is
Mhm.
specific, measurable, achievable, realistic. and time
Mm-hmm.
bound. And I've often seen this in many organizations and many ventures.
Mm-hmm.
Because goals and execution plans are not realistic, that's where they falter, flounder, and fail. And you can actually see it in the startup sector right now, because
Mm-hmm.
everyone created valuation rather than creating value. So very nice, excellent. I'm happy to hear about the realistic part and how you explain that. So you have 3 more to go.
You know, I and like you said, the fifth one goes in is building, being a team builder, because I
Okay,
fundamentally believed over the years that we would have not so which is something which is more specific to what my business does, but the kind of streams we've always tried to build, and something I've learned over the years is that you're only as good as your team, and I can give you all
absolutely.
this jargon under the world that I mean I am this, I'm that, and probably I've built this business all throughout. But one of the best learnings, I think, that was from a book called Outliers, and Malcolm,
Malcolm Gladwell, yeah.
Gladwell's book. He said that this entire term of self-made is absolutely
Absolutely,
like a
absolutely.
non-entity. Why?
A-
Because you can't do anything by being in by idly creating the kind of circumstances you've done over the years. Either it be
Absolutely.
your team, either it being born in a family, or
Right.
doing anything of that sort. And that's why I personally believe that building the right set of teams, building the right set of leaders across the organization, and letting them do it.
Absolutely
And then,
true.
of course, we are not at that scale wherein which we are doing a massive volume per se. I'm not talking about those thousands of crores, but I personally believe that if you idly build the right team, they help you steer the business for the longer bit. And after a point in time, you have to move from execution to actual, like you said, planning, and building the macros, what is really important. And that's how I think this team building quality has really been able to help me over the years. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with you, because I think every leader at every level, right from the top to the bottommost level, has to understand interdependence and harmonious coexistence. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, most organizations, managers, because they are only result driven and not people driven, they create a lot of toxicity, which hampers the team building process. So team building is purely dependent on understanding what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the areas for improvement, and how do we complement each other's strengths and make
Mm-hmm.
the weaknesses redundant, right? So that's exactly how it works. Brilliant. So 6 and 7 now.
Last and the most important aspect would be experimentalist,
Okay,
because like I
that's
said,
that's not the last, because that's the
oh, that's
sixth
the
one.
sixth one. I'm so sorry. It's
Experimentalist. All
Yeah.
right.
Why I say that is because, like I said, an entity, no matter how focused you are on the goals, and I believe, we would have not done what we are doing right now had the pandemic not stuck through,
Mm-hmm.
because the expectation was very different. And I fundamentally believe the biggest challenge in business is to stay relevant in business, and if you've been able to evolve with times, and actually been experimenting with different entities, different sectors, different industries, and experimenting, not like going berserk by getting into newer businesses, but
Mm.
within your own businesses, how you can leverage innovation to idly experiment and come up with newer thoughts, and
Right.
and actually execute them into being. So
Right.
that's really been of immense leverage to us as a
Right.
company.
And to experiment in any
Mm,
organization, whether it's a venture like yours, or a large behemoth, one of those Fortune
mm,
500 or
mm,
100 organizations, a lot of managers speak about innovation and experimenting,
mm,
but then they don't have a culture of failure. What are your
mm.
thoughts on that?
I have been able to learn one thing.
Yeah.
I believe, and that's a ethos which my team really, I mean, we have this internal conversations wherein which we keep discussing about this aspect, that I always tell them, experiment whatever you can, but not at the risk of the client.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you whatever you can do to better an experience, it always works.
Right.
But if you do it at the expense of the client, that's where the concern is. And
Sure.
that's where I fundamentally believe that failure is very important. Why? Because that is what has been, basis which we've been able to build data. The best takeaway I take from a failure is the data I'm able to collect. either it be the consumption, either it be the overall the overall cost to leverage ratio. I mean, what is it that we are doing in
Right.
terms of the overall inventories, what we do. All these aspects come into being once we put them into action, and then if it fails, it fails, no issues.
Right.
Take the learnings,
Right.
move on, but know the data, because
Right.
otherwise if you don't know about whether it's a failure or not, at least in an
Right.
event-based business the way we are in right
Right.
now.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you have a culture of failure in your organization where people can make honest mistakes, because to innovate, to experiment, to do something different or do something differently, you need to have a culture of failure. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that, with with an underlining thought that not at the expense of the client,
No, no,
because
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. It can never be
what
at the expense of the client.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. And what really happens in an organization, I fundamentally believe that we try to experiment more on the demand side and not on the supply side. And
Right.
we are very focused at on the demand side, of course, because newer tricks of demand generation, of sales, business development. That's a fundamental thought. The
Right.
way you manage a client relationship, the entire journey is something you can really play around with. But most importantly, as an organization, we've been able to leverage upon is the supply side. Like
Mhm.
right from the supply side, of vendors, of procurement, of inventory management, to every aspect of an organization. It's a funny thought, and I just would like to just share this thought with you, that we don't come from the industry. Like I said, I come from a very
Right.
different industry.
Right.
And compared to conventional caterers, we were typically making 45-50%, kind of a differentiation in the kind of margins they were making, because of the fact that we really tried to nail the supply side.
Right.
Because that's where the innovation really helps, and that's where I agree that failure is something to be embraced, but at the same time, do it really well. So that's
Right.
how I would like to put it.
Absolutely, and I'm happy that you kind of agree with that, because I've seen in a lot of organizations people want their team members to innovate,
Hmm.
experiment, and the messaging is do something different but don't fail. And I'm like, how does that happen? Because how can you do something different and experimental
I
without
agree.
failing?
I agree.
Brilliant. And what would the seventh and the last one be?
I fundamentally believe, you know, stick by values, and it'll be more or less about honesty, and being fair. I think
Okay.
being fair, or fair is the only word I'd like to use, because I fundamentally believe that the journey of an entrepreneur is such that you get multiple opportunities,
Hmm.
of course, through multiple stakeholders you're dealing with, and to actually be fair or unfair in your dealings. And I fundamentally believe that one of the reasons why we've been able to stick, or any company for that matter, sticks for long, is because you follow a certain code of ethics and the way of dealing. And that's why I use this word fair and not honest, because honesty is about keeping your interest below something, but being fair is about ensuring that all your stakeholders get the right equitable distribution across businesses. And that's something I am mostly resonate with that way. Yeah,
Very nice. So you're talking about having a win-win mindset and
absolutely.
practice the values to do business with honesty, with fairness, where you have equitable and equal opportunity for each and every stakeholder, not just for the shareholders, and do business with integrity and ethics. Very nice. Excellent. So that covers our 7 descriptors which define Manveer Singh Anand, the individual, right? He's entrepreneurial, does things with his own initiative and resourcefulness, believes in having an execution plan and focusing on the execution with rigor and discipline. He's a realist, a team builder, experimentalist, and believes in practicing values of integrity, honesty, fairness with a win-win mindset. So great, Manveer, and brilliant. Which year did you start your entrepreneurial journey?
It started way back in 2013. I was still experimenting, dabbling with multiple things, just trying to work it out. And I always believe that entrepreneurship is sometimes a result of multiple failures or
Right,
experiments which you end up taking.
right,
And during that time, I remember that when I was trying to really work this out, I started my business as a side hustle while
right,
working with KPMG that time, because the management was shifting and so on and so forth.
right.
And that side hustle happened to basically scale to a pretty good volume. We were one of the first guys to start a midnight delivery cloud kitchen way back in 2013 when nobody had heard about cloud kitchens that way.
Right.
And we were able to scale that up to around 3 outlets, doing approximately 250, 300 orders a night. And eventually, like I said, I was the only full-time employee in the organization, I mean, who had actually, quit his job and actually got into this full-time because I was seeing a future. And that's how, we were able to, build the business and eventually scale, sell it off to a private investor. And yeah, so it's way back in 2013 when my first business started. Now,
All right.
the company I run is basically an amalgamation of that, which
Right.
was started in 2015.
Okay, brilliant. And we'll know more about this when you tell us your life story, your journey of life, right from childhood to now. So the next 9 to 10 minutes is exclusive screen time. The virtual stage is all yours. It'll only be you on the screen. So we look forward to learning from your life journey and your life story. Over to you, Manvi. Tell us your life story.
Okay. So like I said, Jerry, I've had a pretty interesting brief, probably to share with you that, and I use this line way too often, and it's the first line in my book also. Life is what happens to you while you're busy planning other things. And
Right.
that's how I fundamentally have lived my life, have really structured things because, like I said, sitting in a room, you don't really make anything. But the very fact that you let life come its way and at the same time keep taking decisions really helps you. So brief background about myself. I did my schooling in Delhi. Was always trying to work it out as to what is the next best opportunity for me, because like any budding student of sorts, you really try to think of the right opportunities, which can really help you actually succeed as a human being. And that's when from school, I and apparently, the funny aspect is I took sciences in school, which was something I was not really aware of, because then the plans were to be a pilot. But eventually, I happened to dabble into economics honors, which was at Delhi University. Happened to really understand the facets of economics, because business was really an area which intrigued me. And after my graduation, the during my graduation, one of the best learnings I was taking was that I was doing a lot of internships, because I was more aligned with the extracurriculars vis-a-vis the actual curricular developments of sorts. And that's when once I had graduated, I joined this management consulting firm, where in which I worked for 3 years, understood all the aspects of businesses, traveled across what I think 25, 30 plus cities, worked across 12, 15 industries to actually understand that to an extent, businesses give you a very good understanding about creating value. And that's when I just thought that, probably bit by the entrepreneurial bug, that why not start on your own? And that's when I started a midnight delivery cloud kitchen way back in 2013, which was around, like I said, midnight deliveries, which we were able to scale to 3 outlets, get a private investor on board, sold that business to a private investor at a pretty decent valuation. And that's when, after doing all of that, guess, what was the most weird thing, I could have done as an entrepreneur. I mean, because I had tasted a very initial level of success. Initial level of success is basically that, within 1.5 years of a business, you're able to sell it at a pretty decent valuation. The best learning came in was that I was thinking that since I made some money in this particular industry, let me go back, because when I started my first cloud kitchen, I had no prior background in the hospitality industry. So I thought, why not probably go to a culinary school and learn about culinary sciences from the very basic. And that's when I went to London, did my culinary management from there. Understood all as facets of French cuisine and so on and so forth. Just to come back to realize one of the most bizarre aspects of the hospitality business. Guess what, Jerry? I just like to ask you. Guess what? It was something as basic as you don't have to be a chef, a culinary management graduate, or a hotel management graduate to start a food business.
Right.
That's one of the best learnings I've been able to take, because that's what this the entire coaching experience taught me. Even though I'm a trained chef now, and but eventually, like I told you, it's a people's business, it's a team building business, and eventually you have to get work done out of people, and you have to practice leadership, how the way it is said. And that's when I happened to come back and start my business called Night Gourmet, which is right now one of the I would say, it's a respected event hospitality services company across the country. We manage hospitality for some of the largest events in the country, including IPL, ISL, a lot of IT tech mandates. And when I say event hospitality, we manage end-to-end hospitality for a lot of stadiums, private venues, and so on and so forth. And this comes from the thought what I told you, that we were looking for markets which nobody else was looking at to formalize. Because what really happens is that, when you talk about event hospitality or the catering industry, a lot of people think about weddings only as it is.
Right.
And what was the way I would say, a big disadvantage turned out to be a massive advantage for me, that I could not speak the language of a traditional caterer
Right.
to actually close mandates, right? So I went in for the B2B businesses part, and that's what we really scaled up. And today, like I said, we've scaled to around 3 local offices: Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai. We have presence across 30 cities, and we've served over 1.35 million people all across the country. And that's how Night Gourmet really started. That it was all started by trying to figure out what our niche was, and then once we figured out our niche, we started building different entities for different industries, like sports, like your live events, your corporate events, and so on and so forth. And that's how we've been able to build an organization of sorts. So that's how Night Gourmet typically started. But that comes in, and that's been my bread and butter for good over 4 years. Till I would say 5 years probably, till the time the pandemic really struck. Because during the pandemic, we were doing one of the best financial years of a company. Over the years, because it takes a lot of time, right? Every year is a newer learning, even though your turnover is increasing. But what is important is that the learnings at the supply chain teach you that there are better margins to be made. And I think I was sitting on one of my most profitable years all across my careers. And that's when, the lightning struck. And we were down to actually, coming down to zero by actually the pandemic, because we didn't know what to do. And from this thriving business, having over 45 people on roll, we were down to actually just me as an entrepreneur sitting in my room trying to figure it out, that how do I actually control all of this. And that's when the pandemic came in. And during the pandemic, of course, I think one of the best vent outs for me was writing this book, which was Catering Your Way to Financial Independence. Because I think what really changed my life could have actually, changed people. And I don't know when things would have come to normal, because the kind of talks, we were having that time, it was like doomsday of sorts, with a lot of discussions around that. And of course, that time we leveraged building building upon this book over the next 3 months. But that gave me a start to my other business, which is what I wanted to just talk to you about. That while I was writing this book, which again, I was not anticipating, and eventually became a bestseller. There were multiple, people were reaching out to me from Poland, from hospitality colleges in Switzerland, probably Cornell University. I was not even expecting that, because, this was a humble initiative. Do you understand a diary entry? This was more like a diary entry, I would have written, because I wanted to build SOPs for a startup I was working on.
Right.
Because I was thinking that probably let's try to work towards the tech side, and, let's try to scale this up. But I amalgamated all those SOPs into a book, and I tried to really put it in a language which a normal person could understand. And that book, while it became successful, it gave me an understanding that there's a big gap in the hospitality education in this country. Mm-hmm. People talk about hotels, people talk about restaurants, but nobody talks about the new emerging businesses like cloud kitchens, like catering businesses. I personally was not even aware about these terms when I was starting out. It was just a random stroke of luck, wherein which I had bounced upon a mandate of bulk requirements, which made me build this business. And that's when I started another company called TKG Ventures, which is a coaching, consulting, and incubation initiative to empower the next generation of food entrepreneurs, wherein which we were running a lot of courses to help budding entrepreneurs start their own businesses, home chefs, home bakers, to actually encapsulate all the ideas into one and actually start executing it. So the entire pandemic I had focused on basically creating these state-of-the-art courses, which were eventually done by over 3,500 people all across the country. And of course, out of them, we've had 15% of the people actually going out to start their own businesses, which has been, one of my best. I would say this is the CSR vertical to Night Gourmet, because we still don't make any money out of that. but you know, like I said, TKG Ventures was the stepping stone for something which I think has made me find a broader purpose in life.
Right.
And through that, now what we do is we run an incubation initiative through which we are investing, you know, small checks across multiple F&B startups,
Okay.
which again becomes part of the portfolio of Night Gourmet, and just trying to build that. So
So
so that's
what
how
is
the
the
pyramid
what is
looks
the
like.
ticket size of your investment?
So anywhere starting 5 lakhs to 40 lakhs. That's the
Five,
kind
five,
of investment.
5 to 40 lakhs, and that's what you are spearheading now with TKG Ventures,
Absolutely, absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And I did read on your LinkedIn profile that you kind of coached and consulted with over 6,500 entrepreneurs, hospitality entrepreneurs, F&B
Absolutely.
entrepreneurs, right?
Absolutely.
Excellent. And you know, sometime during the pandemic is when we also started thinking about how can we actually kind of reach out and create a fellowship for hospitality heroes, because
Hmm.
whether it's house, I mean, the entire community staying in
Hmm.
fancy condominiums in Gurgaon or Bombay, in apartments or villas wherever they stay. I mean, they were so dependent on the facility management services
Hmm.
personnel and the staff who do the housekeeping, including the food to be delivered, right? So many
Hmm.
people who stay alone and reside alone in big cities were
Hmm.
dependent on home caterers and home chefs, like you said.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we should talk about that in more detail, about how probably we can stitch that up by creating a fellowship and an award along with you for hospitality heroes. So
Absolutely.
great. So where is TKG Ventures today? How large is your team, and what is the turnover of the business?
So TKG Ventures is a very humble initiative right now. We have a team of
Right.
5 people right now, but
Right.
very focused around two aspects. One is the coaching aspect, which is basically running a lot of courses. And like you said, the 6,500 number comes in from the entry level courses what we run. But
Right.
the tier two courses, you know, what we are doing is basically
Hmm.
at we're doing approximately 3,500 people, and then we do a lot of private mentoring, because we've understood that, you know, restaurant consulting and the consulting parts are absolutely not a given in the said industry, because
Right.
these are learning businesses, right?
Right. Right.
And through that vehicle, through a SPV, what we have built, special purpose vehicle, we've invested across 12 different companies, which we really hope to scale up in the next couple of months, and you should be hearing about them across the media, because you know, we've really built a pretty good entity there. Talking about Night Gourmet, it's we have a multi-crore turnover right now, and you know, we have a 40 people team across Delhi, Mumbai, and Chennai, and like I said, that's basically been a bread and butter. But TKG Ventures is a relatively smaller team of 5 people,
Right.
but we hope that, you know, with the way things we are looking at, because we are studying the Thrasio models of the world, we are studying a lot of things, and the idea is only one that last 6 months, I personally believe, has been all about trying to get back to normal business, because you know, you need a driving force to actually fund other businesses. So that way, you know, I mean, that's what the focus is. And you know, like I said, TKG Ventures is something, you know, we'd be really focusing on, and that's the next growth vehicle for our company, the way we look
Super,
at it.
super, and happy to explore potential synergies over there, because we see a lot of synergies with what we do with our awards and our fellowship, which is, again, I mean, the award is just incidental, but the bigger focus is on learning and growing, because growth
Absolutely.
happens only with learning. So I'm happy to see that you're focused on coaching people from the industry. So this 12 ventures, are they all cloud kitchens, or are they restaurants? What kind of ventures are these
You know, my
which
focus
you have
always,
enabled the incubation for?
I fundamentally believe that you know, never to look at vanilla spaces.
Right.
When you talk about vanilla spaces, you know, cloud kitchen as an industry, I mean, I've coached multiple entrepreneurs to come to the understanding that the moment you get into a vanilla business costs lower, but the problem with that is that you are sitting in a perfect competition market. So
Right.
that's why what we've done is that we've invested across hybrid cloud kitchens, you know, something in the multi-brand cloud kitchen space. We
Right.
invested something in the crockery rental space, which is basically doing a lot of rental services like what Furlenco does. We do
Hmm.
it for B2B businesses. We've
Hmm.
invested something across other catering companies, where we see a good potential of B2B business being built on the consumer side. Like,
Right.
we've built a very strong business to business company, but we've been trying to build a business to consumer customer, you know, company, and that's where we are acquiring stakes in budding companies who have a cloud kitchen temperament. And the last and the most important aspect, which is two of our portfolio companies which are in the D2C space, which is purely
Right.
doing a lot of e-commerce around F&B, around food services. Because I think D2C as an industry is being abused right now. But I still feel that if you build and if you find the quality companies, there's so much you can do around D2C right now. So
Right.
these are the four broader scopes. One, like I told you, is of course cloud kitchens, but not vanilla cloud kitchens. Something which has a unique differentiator or a certain volume, because
Right.
volume shows that you're creating value, and that's how we look at it. And the second one, like I told you, is more on the supplier side. Anything people are trying to do around kitchen automation, anything they're trying to do around rental, like I told you, for Linko, for B2B companies like mine, is a unique concept, very capital intensive, but great margins. And
Right.
third, like I told you, is around other catering companies. And the fourth is basically around businesses which are in the D2C space, the e-commerce side of things. Yep.
Yes, and there are many investors who are now investing in a big way in cloud kitchens, including the Zomatos and the Swiggies of the world have investments in cloud kitchen, because slowly they are trying to cannibalize the restaurant business, right, and take over the deliveries. And then you have people like Travis Kalanick, who cashed out on his Uber thing, and after that he's been trying to get into the cloud kitchen space. So do you think that this space is getting overcrowded? You keep using the word vanilla. So what do you mean by vanilla businesses? And do you think that now just because some people have seen success in some cloud kitchens, everyone's kind of crowding that space?
So I'll just like to, try to slightly tweak the word. What you say is cannibalize. It's not cannibalize. It's colonize.
Colonize, okay, right,
Okay. And when I say colonize, what really happens there is that of course, they're in the business of creating value. And if you have to show, a shareholder protection of the business model, you have to have, coverage from all elements. Like a Zomato or a Swiggy wants to cover the entire value chain, right? From production to supply, through a hyperpure, to advertising services, to multiple other things. And
right,
like I said, we don't look at that particular market, because if anyone wants to start his own cloud kitchen business today, and he does not have a unique differentiator, then you can't really survive in the business. Cloud kitchen business comes with its own set of advantages. And like I said, I fundamentally believe that when I say vanilla cloud kitchens, it's basically, cloud kitchens which are doing everything for everyone, which has probably an Indian cuisine, a North Indian cuisine, a Chinese cuisine, everything stuck into one. They just want to cater to whatever sells online. They don't care about the aesthetics, the look and feel, the
quality,
perception. All the quality. Like I said, is a given. If you're coming
right,
in the F&B business, quality is a given. You have to give. I mean, I no matter, you build the right niche, you build the right set of processes, you build the right non-vanilla startup, which is with a unique differentiator. But
right,
if your quality is bad, you can't really survive in the business, right? Because it has to always be a good NPS score. But eventually, what is important is that for these companies to ideally, so like I said, quality is a given. But when I talk about a non-vanilla cloud kitchen, I'm looking at a cloud kitchen with a unique differentiator, a set
right,
niche.
right,
Now, the best example for me, you talked about Travis Kalanick and so on and so forth. That's been a long drawn story, because now he's moved out from the business, and there's so much which has transpired over the years. Now you have businesses which are into kitchen as a service model, which is
right,
basically providing kitchen spaces on a service, which is what his company was doing. And they've invested into an Indian-based company, probably providing. There's a model called Kitopi, which basically outsources their entire kitchen operations and makes it in a one centralized kitchen. And they basically provide back into a lot of kitchens. You just have to do the sales and marketing of sorts, right? My
right,
point is, in today's time, a non-vanilla cloud kitchen is a company which can build a unique differentiator around their brand, their packaging, their look and feel, and can gain some good initial traction.
right,
Because that's the whole aspect about finding their this thing. And the fourth and the most important aspect, ease of scalability. Because like I said, a vanilla cloud kitchen is something where in which you'll find 25, 30 items, 40 items, 50 items in a menu. But a traditional cloud kitchen business, look at a McDonald's, look at a Fasos, look at a fresh menu. They would typically have 8 to 12 items per menu, ideally, or a biryani by kilo for that matter. What happens is that via an 8 to 12 item kind of a menu, you can scale up your business much faster. So today, through Night Gourmet, we have presence across 30 cities. And what we're trying to do is that whatever businesses we think can ideally, with the same capex what we're using across these venues, we can provide them with access to a space, capital, and resources to ideally scale their business faster. And that's what if these businesses have a unique differentiator for them to, and like I told you about the other four aspects, for us to scale them faster becomes easier vis-a-vis a vanilla cloud kitchen which just wants to do business out of a Gurgaon. They're happy doing their 25-30 lakh rupee kind of a revenue out of one store. No, that's not the kind of business we're looking at, but respectfully, that's a good business in itself. That kind of number, because a lot of people it's like that. I always say it's like that, the Amazon Snapdeal kind of a era where in which everyone used to think that you just have to open up an e-commerce store and probably the sales would happen by themselves.
Right.
But eventually people understand getting into the business that it's an overcrowded market. I would not deny that. But the size of, if you see the size of the current economy, the organized food retail is not even 10 to 15% of the entire market.
Right.
$6 billion is the overall food delivery market in the country. Only $1 billion is organized.
Right.
So my point is that, if you look at it from a broader perspective, the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 penetration, I think the opportunity has just not started, But the only thing is where it has been abused is, like you said, in the Nariman points of the world, in the Kolabas of the world, in the greater Kailash of the world, because the key areas will always have a lot of cloud kitchens.
Right.
But the opportunity lies in areas which are underpenetrated, and that's where there's this company within the cloud kitchen space, which is called Fasos, the Rebel Foods, which a lot of people talk about. And the beautiful aspect they do is that because at the sheer scale they've been operating at, they try and build supply for a lot of these Zomatos and Swiggies of the world, so that they can cater to certain areas. Right. And what Zomato Swiggy does is that they understand the data of all these companies and they try to build their own brands out of that, to ideally capitalize on that. So like I said, they're trying to colonize. But my point is, aggregators all across the world, be it a Flipkart to an Amazon, I fundamentally believe marketplaces, the model works like that you have to build your own brands to ideally build profitability. Marketplace model has, but but just because of that, do you stop doing business? No, you don't stop doing business, because these are opportunities to capitalize on. So that's how it typically works. Yeah.
Super. So thank you for sharing your insights on the food service and the cloud kitchen business. And though you said that quality is a given, I do find the quality also lacking in many of these cloud kitchens, because sometimes the food that is ordered and served and delivered is absolutely kind of lacking that quality, right? And I've noticed this not only in Gurgaon but also in Goa, because for the first time I downloaded the Swiggy app. Right? I don't use either Swiggy or Zomato, but because I had a back-to-back, consulting sessions, online consulting sessions from early morning to late evening. So for my lunch, I had to download the app, and then after ordering a local sausage pulao, choris pulao as it is called, from a local kitchen, the food, the quality of the choris pulao, neither did it have the taste nor did it have the aesthetic to it, right? And I decided after that to just stick to Kentucky Fried Chicken. Yeah. So I think that qualities are given is also a misconception.
No, I resonate, and that's why, like I said, they're not able to grow beyond a store, or they shut shop. And to give you a perspective, food business is a business of the least shelf life.
Right.
And if you remember the term which I had used, the biggest challenge of being in the industry is to stay relevant over the years.
True. Very true.
And if you've been in the industry for 8, 10, 12 years, you've been doing something good to stick in the industry. But about the companies you just told us, we find that's happening almost on a daily basis at a coaching and consulting sessions, wherein which we find people just thinking that probably you just have to put 10 lakh rupees and you can start a food business.
Right.
And you shut shop in the next 3 years. It's the worst. I would say it's the fastest way to lose money. If you actually want to become, a millionaire, you have to be a billionaire to actually become a millionaire in the food business, because you end up losing a lot of money that way.
It's like that old saying, right? That if you want to come back from Vegas with a small fortune, go there with a big fortune, right?
Absolutely.
So Manveer, coming to your book, Catering Your Way to Financial Independence, right? Because I think a lot of people actually started home chefing businesses
Mm.
during the pandemic, because
Yeah.
it was a kind of a bloodbath where
Mm.
many people lost jobs,
Mm.
many businesses closed down, many people who were on the verge of starting restaurants had to close down and face big losses, right? And I've heard a lot of those stories going all around. uh, now what inspired you? I write stories of real heroes in my Karma Kari book
Mm.
series, and then I of course have the Mojosh Inspirator book series, which is
Mm.
all about self-help, personal development, awareness, and
Mm.
transformation, right? And I
Mm.
tell true stories of real heroes, who, unsung heroes, underdogs, everyday ordinary heroes, as I call them, people who
Mm.
are making a big difference in our world, people who are making a big difference in our lives, and people who are changing mindsets simply by being the inspiration. So
Mm.
what inspired you to start to write this book called Catering Your Way to Financial Independence? And what is the central theme of the book? And can you give us some nuggets from the book?
I'll be very honest, and I like, because I fundamentally have been hearing a lot of stuff about getting a midnight inspiration, life. I wanted to change lives and so on and so forth. But
Right.
believe you me, I'm not even kidding you one bit. This was just out of a humble initiative at a night, where in which I was just trying to figure out what should I do with this time. So much time I have at hand.
Mm,
I mean, the pandemic literally, believe you me, Jerry, just I mean, you run this enterprise, which you're really proud of, and you see this baby going down. Out of a multi-crore turnover, you're just down to zero on in a night, in just a week's time. You don't know what to do, so you have to do something with your time, right?
right.
And it was a very strong feeler I had got from the from the community, because like I said, I sit across a lot of event based forums and so on and so forth, where in which we were discussing about that the events industry would not come back for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and it was like doomsday. What do you do, with it? So my focus was that why not, because we understood that at the current scale now I can't go back to zero and start from scratch. But can this, because I was building SOPs, like I told you, for another company we were working on, and we just thought probably let's try and build that. But there was that eureka moment, in the night, where in which I just happened to feel that can this be structured into a book so that this can resonate with people. And the focus, I always repeat this thing called the power of one. Power of one means what? That if your content resonates with even one person in the world, because I
Right.
was reading a lot about content that time, because that was what was the flavor around webinars and so on and so forth. Even if it resonates with one person, you've done your job. There's a power in selfless initiatives, right? So I just thought, let me just encapsulate all of this book in, all of this content into one book. Right from how do you start up, what is the industry landscape like, to what are the capex you need, what is the niche you should pick up, what is the kind of capital investments you should be doing. All that into one book, put that into a story format, and just share that. I mean, I remember, and my first draft was pathetic. Believe you me, my editor had to probably sit for the longest time and really work around that, because there was a lot of effort, what had gone in. But it was hardcore business knowledge what I was trying to give, but it was not in the light legible format of a book per se, which he really helped me put into perspective. And like I said, once I wrote this book, I was very clear that I mean, even if this book resonates with one or two people, I think I've done my job.
Right.
So I think exactly around the 27th of May, last to last year, I had just shared the cover of my book, and there was a lot of curiosity, which got developed, and where I saw a definite synergy in the book and so on and so forth. And because of that, I eventually happened to launch after one and a half month of that. And to my surprise, I don't know how Amazon algorithm works, but the book was being very well received all across the country.
Right.
And I was wondering that how people know about it. Like I told you, people were reaching out to me from hospitality colleges, because this is the only book around, just to put into perspective, this is the only book around outdoor catering industry all across the world, which teaches you how to start a food business,
Right.
or a catering business. There's nothing around this content anywhere across the world. So
Super.
so this really helped us reach out to a wider audience. And ever since, we've reached out multiple people, and that's how the story had transpired, that it was just out of uh, you know a, I would say, selfless attempt to just make use of good time and just make sure that, the power of one. And even if it resonates by one person, boss, हमारा काम हो गया है, कुछ नहीं होता, at least we try to use our time better.
Right.
But the book really changed things for me after that. That's what I can
Excellent,
say.
brilliant. So at this point, let me request you to read a couple of paragraphs from the book, which would benefit the people who are watching us on Facebook Live and inspire them to start their catering business and cater their way into their financial independence.
So, Jerry, you'll have to allow me a quick minute for that, because,
Sure,
like I said,
sure,
I
go.
was just in transit.
Take your
And
time. And meanwhile, for all the people who have joined us on Facebook Live, Manveer Singh Anand's book "Catering Your Way to Financial Independence" has a lot of nuggets and a step-by-step guide for starting a successful outdoor catering business. In case you've lost your job or been unable to find a job, maybe this is your path to nirvana and path to financial independence. So please do buy the book. It's available on Amazon and at leading bookstores. And Manveer will now be reading out a couple of paragraphs from the book. So Manveer, we are waiting for you. So Manveer is going to be back with us in a couple of moments with his book and read out a couple of paragraphs from the book. Yes, Manveer, you're on mute.
my bad, Jerry. Sorry. I mean, like I said,
Not at all, not at all. You've been traveling, so go ahead, read out a couple of paragraphs which would benefit and give some insights to all the people who are watching us on Facebook Live.
absolutely,
And show your book also to the audience. Yeah.
absolutely. That's the book, Catering Your Way to Financial Independence. And like I said, it's been a game changer for us to a large extent, because it's really benefited a lot of people all across spectrum, especially hospitality entrepreneurs. And like I said, it's been a great learning for us, while writing this book. And that's why, like I said, what I'll do is I'll give you a basic preface from where, I had started writing about the concept, and it'll give you a lot of perspective into what is it that we had done, and what is it that we think about the industry in itself. So should I go ahead, Ajay?
Go ahead, please. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I had my first experience at catering while running a struggling cloud kitchen, which was looking for survival in a price-conscious market of the North Campus of Delhi University. With a limited idea of the world, catering, starting with bulk meals, it gradually evolved to thali service, then to caters, which is called probably, all the catering companies, the basic catering companies, they didn't know about the term caterers, which is basically the halwai community. So they used to call themselves caters before reaching the term catering and in itself. So that's how the gap was, that a lot of people didn't even know about catering as a term. And even I didn't know about catering as a term while running that cloud kitchen business. And it's been a long journey and a great experience. And that's where life is what happens to you while you're busy planning other things. What John Lennon said. Out of us three partners in the initial cloud kitchen business, I took the lead to initiate catering as a way to open a new sales avenue. Destiny favored us and it grew exponentially. And it started feeding the retail side of our business, which eventually yielded a better value for our company when we planned to sell the chain because of internal partnership boost. After my exit from the business, I was happy, but in a dilemma. And finally, I enrolled myself in a recognized culinary program. The training exposed me to the fundamental reality of the catering industry, that you don't have to be a chef or a hotel man graduate to run a catering unit or any F&B business. What you need is hardcore business skills and a little common sense, which again, like I said, is not common. And some of the largest catering companies in the world are not being run by chefs or hotel management graduates, but by common men like you and me with a diverse set of entrepreneurial skill sets. Since then, I've always worked across around catering, working seasonally for private sports leagues, starting an equipment rental company, running high volume cloud kitchen brands, and so on and so forth. And like I said, with limited startup costs, neither does one need to invest in a prime real estate location for his office space, nor you need to maintain a high capital intensive infrastructure. You have control of your life and your calendar because you can close the dates in advance to meet other personal and professional commitments. And that's why catering is the way forward for a lot of budding entrepreneurs in the F&B space, because it's capital light and scalable. The success of an event well executed is both rewarding and addictive. The catering arena is full of success stories of the business units that reached to a multi-crore operation because of sheer focus on basic principles of business. The biggest challenge you will face is changing the paradigm from a typical promoter-run catering operation to an owner of a mid to large-scale catering company. And that's where your profitability will be determined by shedding the technical hat at times and focusing on those proactive duties that determine your lowest and highest lines. So that's one part of the preface. But like I said, with the advent of COVID-19 and alarming levels of unemployment in times to come, the time is ripe to start your career in the outdoor catering business, whether you're just intrigued by the F&B industry or a seasoned pro in the hotel and restaurant operations. We have tried to write this book as a perfect catering business guide for you to embark on a journey of financial independence. It can be a go-to guide for all aspects of managing a catering business. I wish I had access to a similar resource when I was starting out, as it would have helped me to avoid pitfalls and scale my company faster. Larger ticket sizes, limited resource requirements, and fewer barriers to entry give a caterer an unfair advantage over any other business model. Also, make the outdoor catering business the most viable and accessible niche for self-employment for any entrepreneur in the F&B industry. So like I said, this is basically the preface part, but I'd like to cover the last and the most important part,
Sure.
which is about why I say that, catering your way to financial independence, is where I have mentioned the last chapter about breaking myths, breaking mental barriers, and the frequently asked questions. And the question a lot of people used to ask me was, how can one achieve, and that's the seventh part, the last para of my book, how can one achieve financial independence through a career in catering? Before I delve further into this part, I would like to clarify the concept of financial independence. The central premise of financial freedom is that your passive income, that is income from your assets and business, should be exceeding your active income. However, I would like to clarify that catering is a full-time job, which will need your sincere effort and dedication. And by the concepts explained in the previous chapters, that is by leveraging the plan of no kitchen model, which is something you have to read the book on, and building a systematic process of sales and marketing, you can generate an infinite return on your investment. And like I said, this part of infinite return and no kitchen model is something you'll have to read the book for to understand what is it that I've told you about. Infinite returns are achieved when you own a business but no longer have any of your money invested into the business. Instead, your brand generates your income, and to initiate the catering mandates, the client will pay you the token advance to get started. So you don't have to pay anything upfront. This way, you can earn infinite cash on cash returns from your business, taking cue from one of the most legendary books, which is called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. However, this needs consistent efforts over a while. Lastly, financial independence in business is a state of mind where you focus on building a lean and positive cash flow business with minimal capital expenditure. As you keep growing in your industry and your niche, you will realize that basis your credibility and brand you built over the years, you can start generating passive income, since you will be putting a system and a team in place through a set of loyal customers and credible reputation. And the last and the most important aspect, like I said, these are the important paragraphs I had to share, but the beauty I wanted to share about the catering industry with any budding entrepreneur is that you don't need to have 100 clients on day one. You need to have 1 or 2 clients which give you 100 events in a year. That's what is the fundamental reality of the catering business. And if you're in that business and if you understand this fundamental ethos, you will be able to build a very solid business, which a lot of our community members across our cloud kitchen courses and other people have been able to do. And I'll tell you about stories, Jerry, that a lot of them I know about, homemakers, about home chefs who actually converted to a professional catering entity on a cloud kitchen company, cloud kitchen, which caters to over 100 meals a day or
Right.
200 meals a day. Out of a simple, home based setup, they moved up, only keeping these facets into their being. So that's pretty
Absolutely.
much from my side.
Thank you so much, Manveer Singh Anand. Those are some great insights, and I'm sure people who read the book will get many more tips, many more ideas about how they can cater their way into financial independence. And thank you for making the time and joining us today. Thank you. Thank you to
Absolutely.
everybody in the audience who's joined us on Facebook Live. Please do go and buy Manveer Anand's book, Catering Your Way to Financial Independence. It's available on Amazon and at leading bookstores. So thank you, and pleasure having you with us
Thank
at
you.
the Experience Cool Convos with Inspiring Authors. Have a good evening. Thank
You
you.
do. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for
Good
having
evening
me.
to all people who joined us on Facebook Live also. Thanks.